right, man. Welcome back to the best day of the year.
Best day is your favorite day. Had a lot of people sending me messages, got a couple cards, even a couple gifts in the mail. You know, it's my favorite holiday. It is Halloween. Couldn't be more pumped. It is my favorite day. Went out last night. You know, I got home from vacation. I mean, and I was going to extend the vacation, but I was like, who wants to spend time on the beach? Get me back for Halloween. Yeah, I can't. I mean, so I went straight to the store. I bought 8 bags of Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, my favorite candy. And I said, I cannot wait to get home and give all this shit away, get 10% of it back, and then black licorice, jelly beans, Rolos, Junior Mints. You know, I can't wait to just lose all this and have my dog be scared shitless all night long with people ringing the doorbell and knocking on the door. I mean, I can't wait. I'm pumped. It was a perfect day to come back from vacation.
Oh yeah, welcome back. I mean, it's the perfect day to. Halloween is basically, it's that saying, don't try, Bukowski, don't try to be somebody you're not. That's the way I look at that. And everybody out there is trying to be somebody else today, but maybe that's, maybe we should start embracing the costumes, man.
I think people should. Yeah, that's what we'll call it. We'll call them October, because that's what it is today. It's October 31st, 2025, and it is embrace the costume day. Well, that's how we'll refer to it. But no, it's a Crushing Iron podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. We were a little bit off late last week and earlier this week. I was on a little family vacation down on the beach, trying to get away at the end of the year and take some time away and kind of refresh and recharge, spend some extra quality time with Hayden too, which is super important to me. But yeah, it's good to be back. And this is episode 886 coming to you and hot at the end of the week. And again, checking it out on a holiday. We're still working. We're still, punching in, but somewhat of a busy weekend, not super big, but you got Ironman Florida this weekend. Weather looks to be fantastic. I was just down there, and the water is if it's not wetsuit legal, something's wrong, because the ocean water was chilly. And I can't, but it looks, it's always a great race. You never know what you're going to get there. The seas could be rough. The course is what it is, like all courses, but it's usually the wind and like the early morning temps that kind of get people, like you don't know what to wear. And then if it's going to be windy, you might get hot, then you might get cold later. So it's again, like we always talk about with Ironman races, you can pick a race all you want to based on the terrain, but the majority of these, what I would call easier style races, from a bike and run terrain standpoint, almost always offer something different. As in they've got ocean swims that could be, I think Ironman Florida had their swim canceled once, had like the last 3 years, not shortened, but I think at least canceled once. But with the Gulf, you legit never know what you're going to get. So it does have that. But then you got the wind, and with like loop course, you're going to fight. So yeah, again, when you're looking at, especially just kind of going into this next year, people looking at their race calendar, trying to figure out what might work for them for 2026, do a lot of, I tell people, do a lot of soul searching before you pick the race that you really want to nail for the year. And if it's, if you're going off trying to find an easy course, I find that most people like get bit in the butt with those, because they sometimes tend to not take them as seriously because the course might be a little bit easier. Same thing with like, we've seen this a ton, right? With Ironman Chattanooga, the 70.3, right, when they went away from the 1.2 because, that 200-yard upstream swim was just way too difficult for most triathletes. They scrapped that, and the only way to fix it was to go upstream. So it was like a 1.6 or maybe a little bit longer, right? Swim.
No. I think it's 1.4, but it's like 2,600 yards or something.
Yeah, something like that. So it's a little bit longer. But I think people underestimate that. So again, it's just a good reminder, I think, going this weekend for Ironman Florida, weather should be fantastic, maybe a little bit cool, but as with all things and as with life, there's always something that kind of pops up, and you got to be, mindful of. And that's what I keep coming back to sport is the moments that it creates. And I think it's a great way to end the year off too with these two races. You got Arizona, Cozumel, in Florida this weekend. You know, what you got 70.3 Worlds next weekend. So yeah, I mean, November's still pretty fucking full. And then you got December now. It's like they string them out. Honestly, outside of like January and February, that you're pretty much going. And so yeah, it's anyway good. It's good to be back. Had a great time away. Thanks for the patience and appreciate you being super flexible and bumping this to what I also know is one of your favorite holidays.
I mean, yeah, there was something about it back in the day, but I don't know anymore. I was thinking about we were just talking about Navy SEALs beforehand, and I was thinking about Ironman Florida and coming out of what you said might be cold water, and you imagine if they made you roll around in the sand after you got out of there. And then I just think you're talking about, as you're talking about it, I thought, our thing before the cast was kind of talking about resilience, and, you still got, Ironman, easy course, flat, whatever you want to call it, it's all about resilience. So, I just like that as a topic today. It's been getting colder up here, and then, it's always like, this time of the year, what are we going to do? And, I've just been trying to get out there, and go through it, because if you can kind of spin your head into this idea, it's like, yeah, this is a gift, this tougher weather, this tougher situation, and I've just been kind of trying to get in the lake more with some plunging and just like really sort of like set the table for the off season. And kind of talking to a lot of athletes about, I know you kind of think about like this too. We were talking about, this is almost some of the toughest time of the year. I think actually the toughest time of the year in the winter, or at least in the north, is probably January, February, March sometimes, because it sort of hangs on, But this has got to be the second toughest with holidays and all that kind of stuff. And, just sort of like you say, staying in the ballpark kind of mentality to get like into the end of January, because you're going to get that bump on January, that kind of psychological bump about, okay, here's the year, but sort of getting to the end of January with that really in the ballpark, train like train so you can train like you need to train kind of by the end of January. I think it takes a little bit of resilience right now, at least for me, figuring out, ways to embrace what's coming. We're talking about up north, Midwest,
I think it's when it comes to thinking about next year, and I think one of the reasons people love to go ahead and think about next year is, I know people like to plan. Triathletes love to, make a plan, get their race calendar up, sign up for races, do this thing. That's the exciting part, right? Training, sometimes not so much, right, for triathletes. But this is like, and again, like I completely agree. Like that February, March is kind of the last hour of the road trip. You're almost there. And so everything that happens is more frustrating. Like you can be on like a 10-hour road trip and you're in middle way, and like I still it's like nothing's really gonna interfere. I don't even know when to get there, but like the last hour, you're on edge, your legs ache more, you're just uncomfortable, and it's because you're so close. I even use like the road trip pee analogy, right? Like you could be holding it for an hour and you're good to go, but as soon as you get off that fucking exit, you're like, I can barely get out of the car right now because I have to go so bad. It's because you're so close. And I think that's why we're resilient enough to an extent, like January and February, beginning of February, because we know we've got to hunker down. We know we're a long way off from when the weather, turns and we get to be, do more things outside, get our bike back outside. There seems to be more daylight. It feels better. We're closer to race day. Things are more exciting. More races are happening right on the pro circuit that you can follow, and they're televised. Just more exciting. But the closer you get, I think the more irritable people get with stuff like that. The same thing to me goes for like this time of year. And I feel like it's like the extended case of like the Mondays. But what I mean by that is like, during the season, as coaches and even, as we're both athletes, like I'm sure we'd do this ourselves. And I've been guilty of it before. You're like, you have a couple of days and you're solid. You're like, yeah, but I'll get back to go, next Monday. It's not a big deal. I'm too far away from the season. I'll get a few things and I'll get back at it next week. Or you're like, yeah, but I've got a vacation coming up. Why, getting interrupted, them to, kind of lose. So let's just start afterwards. And that gets extended. And that's where we are right now, because you're at the end of the season. And again, neither one of us are advocating for like going all in right now. Not happening. Don't recommend it. Maximum flexibility, day off a week, have fun, change it up, but stay moving, right? Stay like, and honestly, like you probably keep some of the same 60, 70, 80% of your usual like volume, but just have it very like flexible volume, like make it whatever you want to make it. But right now we're like, but the holiday's about to come up, and then we got Thanksgiving, so I got to travel, and I know I'm going to eat like crap, and I kind of enjoy myself, and that's not going to feel good. So I'll just wait till after Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving happens, you're like, I got Christmas next month. Like, oh no, I'm not going to do much then. Then you got, you know what? Fuck it. January 1st, I'm in. And you're looking at 2 months. And it's funny because I had like, and it's funny you went this direction with it, because I had this conversation with an athlete the other day, as they were like, yeah, but I really wanted to double check, that now that we're like 3.5 weeks out from this race, like I really want to be specific about things. I said, listen, man, I appreciate that thought process, but what you were doing 3.5 months ago was just as important, if not more important, than what we were doing 3.5 weeks out from a race. I don't, and this is something I think all athletes struggle with, is that the work that you're doing right now, a week or two out, is more than likely not going to affect how fast and fit you are on race day. You're just trying to keep the fitness that you had. But for whatever reason, like the closer we get to race day, athletes think that they just happen to get like better stimulus from the workouts that they do because we're quote unquote closer to race day. If you're racing, let's say this weekend in November, or whatever, it'd be the 1st tomorrow. Yeah. So November 1st or 2nd, whatever the day is for Ironman Florida. And the workouts that you did in June, July, August, those were just as, if not more important than the stuff that you did in October. But we get like, the closer we get to race day, we tend to weight the workouts. Like, I think we overweight them. Like we tend to think that they give way too much from us, but it's like, it's what you do throughout the year, right? And it's just, again, it's the same thing goes for like an athlete that takes January, February, or most users isn't it, but they take off November and December completely through the holidays, don't do anything. And yes, detraining is good. Everybody needs it, especially for the mind. But to get like totally out of shape, put on a few pounds, you treat your body like a carnival ride. And then you come back in January and you're so frustrated with how you let yourself, much you let yourself go, that January, February, you're not motivated because you don't like the numbers you see, and you're consistently frustrated. And then finally, mid-March to early April hits, you're like, all right, now I'm back in the groove. You just lost 4.5 months. Mm. And again, like this isn't like, neither one of us are trying to advocate for year-round, perfect discipline. I mean, that'd be a standard neither one of us could answer to. But the point is to stay moving and active and engaged, whether it's choosing to do even like the polar opposite of what you've got on tap each day. But it's just, again, and yes, is it getting out the door when you don't want to, right? When the weather's crappy and the weather's cold and it's dark outside. Yeah, we all get tired of that shit. But there's always going to be something. I was just kind of taking a jab at one of my athletes this morning. He lives in Texas. They're like, it's too fucking cold outside this morning to bike. And I'm like, I swear to God, Texans, for as tough as you guys act like you are, you're always bitching about how hot it is throughout the year and then how cold it is. There really is no in between. I mean, it's like, it's just always, it's too cold. Like, I can't go outside. It's like, and I'm like, what is it, 70? And they're like, no, it's in the 40s. I'm like, welcome to like 4 months out of the year in Kansas. Like, yes, it's uncomfortable. But again, like there is, there's a lot of things we can do right now, I think, to, again, make ourselves more, like we talk, more durable, more resilient, more focused. And it doesn't have to be triathlon specific. And I mean, I think that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck this time of year and fearing like the burnout, is that they feel like they have to be overly specific. Let's say you're craving the run right now, which I think is a great thing, and because again, I think running right now gives you, maybe not this month because it's still pretty perfect conditions, but like come, into December, January, February, the coldest months of the year. To me, that those runs provide you the best opportunity, right, for just increasing fitness with the least amount of time, right? Because running takes the least amount out of your time. You don't have to drive to the pool. You don't have to do these super long bike rides. You don't have to get, set up your bike, pain cave or whatever it is. It's just, you go out there and run. But the weather can present challenges, right? It's going to be windier. It's going to be colder. There's going to be snow. You're going to have to be running on different, kinds of terrain. It's going to be dark pretty much no matter what, right? Early morning, regular morning, or evening. And you get out there and you just do it, and then just swim once a week and bike twice. And that's it. But it's like there's ways to get ahead, I think, that you can't really fully appreciate until you are closer to race day. And that's to me, like, and you hear this too as a coach, right? It's like the closer you get to a race, athletes tend to reminisce about how far they've come, not how much they did in the last 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I think to me, like, because I was an athlete that was doing Arizona, which is saying like, hey, and one, you just love to hear athletes talk like that because they're showing like a certain level of gratitude that I think is good for, at least, again, no scientific research to back this, but I think a high level of gratitude is good for at least 5 to 15 minutes in Ironman. I think just like the mentality of being grateful and how you approach it is good for some minutes. And so, but they always look back and they're like, yeah, I just, look back on how far I've come. Again, they don't look back 3 weeks. They're like, yeah, I can't believe how far I've come in the last 3 weeks. It's irrelevant. Like, and you're only as good as you are in those last 3 weeks because of the last 3 months. And then those 3 months and the previous 3 months, and so if you're looking at like this time of year, again, you're afraid to be too serious, right? And, which is fine. You don't have to be too serious, but you can still be purposeful. I think it's just shifting the direction and the target of that purpose into something that's a little more maybe nourishing the mental and emotional side, but also making sure we're engaging with that physical side, that we're still primed and ready for whenever it is you might want to be ready to just, let things loose and get completely dialed in.
Mm. Yeah, man, that's all good stuff. I kind of like to call this yellow season, because how I've talked about how I like to see yellows and training peaks, because it if you gave it an effort, or you may have felt better than you thought and you kind of stretched it out a little bit or something like that, because now's the time for that, man. You can that there's a thing called, like, I call it the triathletes or typical triathlete cycle, which is exactly what you described. It's kind of like shit. You look back and you're like, 4 months just went by and I didn't do shit. And now I've got to kind of go through what I went through again, and I know I can do it. And I know this very well. It's sort of like you kind of just get your ass to like February or whatever. And then you start again, and then you wonder, boy, I'm doing this again, and I'm going to have the same kind of result again. And it's just really interesting how we kind of fall into that. It's the old cramming for a test. Yeah, you can get it done, and it might be a decent day for you. But if you'd have just been studying all along, you wouldn't have had to cram and stay up all night and hope that your brain was working on final day. It's now's a good time to find something you love, or that's kind of that you look forward to. And like you're saying, most people, it kind of tends to be running. I've been thinking about it lately. I was like, because there's been periods throughout my career where I've really gotten into the trainer, and I'm like, well, mate, if I can get, like, I don't want to overdo it, but I'd like to get in a really good habit of getting on the bike and just kind of working my bike all winter. To me, that's been a thing. But I also, in my mind, I'm like, I'm getting greedy here. So I want to run on the sand a lot too. And then I want to do this a lot. And you it's tough to keep up with. It's sort of like exciting to plan out, like you're saying about races or whatever. I've used the analogy of starting a band. It's really fun to kind of start a band like at a bar or like at a coffee shop and have plans, and we're going to rip this up. But the hard part is actually kind of getting consistent and doing work. And this is really a great time to just kind of find something that feels good. And I don't know, what do you think? It's if you stay consistent from now through, February, end of February, you're probably ahead of like 80% of triathletes, or half of them at least, probably.
I mean, you're not only you so far ahead, but you're also not allowing yourself to be so far behind. And again, like I think we can't understate that enough, and that is where most people find themselves, and why they keep having repeated races year after year with the exact same result or worse results, is because of this, either this gigantic period of time off or frustration. And this is, listen, this is why people, because I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast right now that aren't even in the sport. They leave the sport, they've got unfit, and so the last thing you want to do, especially having been in the sport, is to go back out and see numbers that you really don't want to see. Because then you start to resent, I mean, because then you start to resent the time off. You resent how unfit you are. You almost like hate the version of yourself that you used to be, because you don't think you can ever get back there. And so you're just so mad at yourself. It's so demotivating, because you're consistently just living in the past and not just accepting that even if you worked out today and haven't worked out for a month, 2 months, a year, you're still further ahead today than you were yesterday. And that's just a really hard concept to get people to kind of like wrap their brain around. Because everybody wants everything now. But if you can't have it now, they don't see the point in doing it. And that's just not how endurance training works. Like, and we get questions about this all the time, I just want to work with, a coach for like 3 months leading up to our race. I'm like, well, that's great, but you're going to pay me for 3 months and you're going to get 2 months of training, because the first month, like, I've got to figure out the way that you work, the way that you operate, what you've been doing, and then possibly like overcorrect. Like that's the same reason that you and I would both prefer to take a swimmer that's had no experience in the water over one that's been the last 10 years of bad habits. Like, give me someone to mold fresh, doing it the right way with the right technique and the right stroke mechanics, versus someone you have to unlearn and unteach, because they've already picked up so many bad habits. It's hard to unteach that. You're fighting like two different battles. They're the way they've been taught and now how you want to teach them, versus a blank canvas. You just tell them what to do and then they just do it. And that's the same way, again, like with, again, like the short-term fixes, like you're going to pay for 3 months, but you're going to get 2. And it's probably a bad sales job, but it's just the honest to goodness truth, because you and then you can only work with what you're given based on what you've done, because these systems that we work with, like what we're trying to do from an efficiency and an economical standpoint, our aerobic system, like these things take a tremendous amount of time. And that's also the problem with some of these certain times a year where people just want to hammer it all the time. All that time they get to closer race day, like they've been training for an Olympic when their A race is an Ironman. And you're like, all right, well, we can do a few of the best things we can these last few weeks, but it's not the damage has been done, right? But it is a lot of like, that's just wasn't the right way to train, so here we are. So it's always great to have like this long-term view, but that's also why people don't want to get started, because you can do these short, hard workouts 24/7 all the time and get a big fitness boost within like 2 or 3 weeks. And then you get disillusioned to think like this is the way to train. And then you find yourself never getting better again, because or even having like some regression when it comes to your fitness. Maybe even see your numbers get worse. And that's why it's good to have a plan and like a long-term view of it. And right now, again, it should just be about priming the engine, having some fun, and really not doing too much work either direction. Right. And that's like, I was listening to a podcast on the way home yesterday about, this is a small side topic, but like not a huge one, I guess, because it's an analogy, but basically they're talking about how, first of all, how ridiculous any of like the, RDA like recommendations are for daily nutrition, and how absolutely ridiculously low the recommended guidelines are for like protein for the average person. It's just like insanely low. And so when he was advising the like a different recommended dose, he said, I always, aim higher. Basically, because if you don't get enough protein in a day, like, you work through all your amino acids and it ends up being a negative. If you go over, there really is no harm. So you at least at the minimum maintain, if not help out your strength. So going over is fine. Going way under, you can't overcorrect, because the damage is already done. So he says you always aim over, because you're never going to be perfect each day. You're going to, let's say, just for example, it was like, the goal was to do 2 grams, 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. But he was like, but I tell them 2, when really the recommended for them is probably 1.8 or 1.9, because some days you're going to be 1.4, some days are 1.5, some days 1.7, other days are going to be 2.3, 2.4. But the goal is to always get as close as you can to going over, so you can at least maintain and not just constantly lose, especially as we get older, right? Especially for women, you're going to maintain, you're going to lose muscle and bone density. Anyway, but saying that all to say, one, that's how right now should feel. Like, the goal is to maintain for a lot of people, but it's also not to create like an over surplus of fitness, but also too shallow or empty of a pool of fitness either. Like, we don't want our glass to be overflowing, right? We're too far away from race day, but we also don't want to just fucking drain it and see it could be completely empty in January or February or March or whenever it is you feel like you need to get your act back together. And that's just, and you see it all the time. And I've seen it with so many post Ironman Wisconsin athletes too, that are like had incredible days. And they're like, and then like 4 days, they're like, I want to get back at it. And I'm like, I caution you to do that, or even to have that like mentality. And the majority of them, it's like 2 sessions a week, maybe. And they're like waiting to get back in. I'm like, this is exactly how you should do it. Like, wait to get back in. There should not be forced. And don't tell yourself I'm ready to get back at it. Mentally, your body will let you know when it's ready to get back at it. And I think, but this time of year, when you look at things, let your body lead the way. But here's the other thing is, it's also, to me, the easiest time of year to find an excuse to not do anything, to not do a session, to just mail it in, to, because listen, we all find these, right? It's we find these and sometimes they're true, right? But we all find, I did it this last weekend, vacation, like one day I had an interval run I wanted to do, but Hayden was like, I want to go ride my rollerblades. Can I go do that while you run? And I'm like, sure, I'll just run easy. And I have the tendency to always kind of revert to aerobic versus reverting to like harder. And some people are the opposite, right? They always want to run hard and they never want to run easy. I always just kind of like, sign me up and we'll go out and run aerobic. I'm very rarely like, I want to go out and just fucking hammer it. So I did that with him, but could I have run intervals? Yes. There was that like, and we all do this, that there's that like self-righteous, but I'm just being a good dad. Like, I'm spending quality time with my son. Like, yes, I was. But then same thing happened, whatever day it was. I had some fartleks on the schedule, and I had a little too much seafood the night before, and maybe have swung through Kilvin's ice cream. And so I woke up and I was feeling like dirt. And I went out for my run, and I was like 20 minutes in, and I was like, God, the trash. I'll just skip it. Listen to my body, listen, when I'm not feeling great, backing down to aerobic is the same advice you. Then I said, stop being such a pansy and do the intervals that you're supposed to do today, and don't skip them just because. And so I did my intervals. But I think like the further we are from races, the easier it is for us to make those excuses, because they don't feel like excuses, right? They feel like we're doing the right thing, or we're making the right choice. And listen, there's this conversation we have each day with ourselves all the time. I think with all things, like with training, is like, is this the right call? Is this not the right call? Because you don't want to be a robot. And yeah, sometimes the best call is to skip it and go spend time with family. Sometimes, sometimes the best job is to back down intervals and do your easy run. But sometimes it's also just like, you know what, you man the fuck up and just get it done today. Because if you wake up on race day and you're not feeling it, guess what you're not going to do? Yeah, I'm just going to kind of just cruise this one in, or I'm just going to bag it. No, sometimes you just got to be like, you know what? I made the choices I made last night. That doesn't give me the right to just opt out of the hard session today because I chose to be irresponsible last night with the amount of seafood that I consumed, and so we all have these, but this time of year, I think it presents yourself even more because you're far away from a race. Things are super flexible. Maybe you're not feeling it. It's dark outside. It's cold. The excuses abound. They're freaking everywhere. And so again, like, you want to be, you're overzealous. I don't want to be this disciplined right now, and I don't revolt. But when you do it enough and your goal is just movement and exercise and doing things for yourself and for your body, or relieving stress, right? Or just moving, like, these things are all good for you just generally. Like, remove training, remove, quote unquote training, and remove racing. Just think about, like, if you were to give a recommendation to someone that you knew who was, had a lot of responsibilities, who wanted to stay in shape, who wanted to increase their longevity, who wanted to, elevate their mood, you'd be like, yeah, just go out and run a few times a week, maybe lift a few times a week, maybe hop on your bike, go on a walk. And, we always think of things in like a training aspect. Like, it's got to be actual training. It's got to be a regimented schedule and periodized and focused to get to where I really want to go. But if we just remove the race and we were trying to tell our best friends or family members or our spouse or, someone who asked our advice, you'd be like, you don't need a race. Like, you just need to take care of yourself. Because if you have those thoughts where you see someone and you're like, man, like, I wish they would just take better care of their health, you wouldn't be like, what you need to do, sir, is sign up for an Ironman. Like, I know you're overweight, you're not sleeping, you're super stressed, you're sick all the time. I've got the cure, dude. It's sign up for Ironman Wisconsin. I mean, just drop 15, 20 grand, get you a bike, sign up, get you a hotel room, boom, let's go. No, you'd be like, listen, man, get some sleep, focus on your sleep, right? Do things that are going to be helpful for your stress and your mood. Do some meditation, do some yoga, maybe, sauna, cold plunge, start with walks, just get out and move every day, 30, 45, 60 minutes, then when you can jog, start to jog, hop on the bike, take a group fitness class, try to get, just start with a few push-ups during commercial breaks. That is the advice you would give anyone that try to get them to be a healthier, better, more energized, less stress version of themselves. You don't have to have a fucking race on the calendar. But yet triathletes, once you've had a race, you feel like you cannot and no longer ever operate and actually move your body and be consistent with, your goals of what you want to get out of life without having an event or having that event be within 30, 60, 90 days. And then you want to wreck yourself for 3 months, have a lackluster race result, be pissed at the end of it, and go right back into the same cycle.
Mm. Yeah, I'm really trying to think of this time of year as more like being an athlete versus chasing a race goal. That kind of lines up with what you're just saying. And it's sort of like this, how do you keep going? It's so interesting to me because that interval little example you gave there, for me, it's kind of like this time of year, I always start with the mindset of, I'm just going to go out and do it and see what happens. Because, with me, it's, some days I feel great out there and some days I just decide, okay, I'm just going to chill. And I take what, a long time ago, we used to talk about how Cody Beals used to just kind of judge the day by the day. And that's sort of I like to do that all the time kind of, but especially now I think it's a really good piece of advice because you might wake up and be like, I don't want to go out and run, but I do. The trainer sounds great, or, the rower, whatever you want to choose, swimming, whatever. It's a really good time to do that. But I think just that mindset of just being versus chasing is really what gets me in a good spot with this, because if I have to, start thinking about this race that's coming down and how I'm going to cut, 15 minutes off the bike and all this kind of shit, then it just starts to be, it's just a thing that's out there that never really satisfies you anyway. I think it's kind of like, we all just want to do, my first Ironman, I was just like all I thought about all season. And then I kind of still have that mentality going a lot of times. It's like, it doesn't do it. The actual race doesn't do it for you, So now's the time it's really a good time to just sort of strip things away and be the true you that you want to be. And whatever path you take, it might be a little bit different than what you're used to, because it's sort of like, you don't want to force things right now. I feel like you might want to force yourself to kind of get into some kind of pattern, but whatever that pattern becomes can look like a lot of different things, and I don't know, we talk about it a lot. It's sort of like, there's times like this when, maybe it is the time of the year when you get to the pool and you figure out a way to have fun working on form or something like that. Or, it's like we all are, I feel like as humans, we're always trying to, like be a better person or be happier or be healthier and all these kinds of things. And this is a really good time of year to sort of go after that, and that, like you said, it may not always be this regiment of training. It's just sort of exploring and figuring out ways to kind of get to the core of who you are and feeling better as you do it. And I think that, there's something to be said for just feeling good, and this is a really perfect time to kind of just do that and get stronger and come into that new year with a refreshed attitude. And, like, I just think if you kind of like clean the slate a little bit right now, it's sort of like that hibernation kind of analogy, they just hibernate and come back and be like ready to go, and it's not massive, like give it all up, kind of just rest kind of thing, but just find that place that sort of recharges you. I mean, like the next 3 months can be like the recharge time, and I think sometimes we just kind of fight it because we're like, God, we just got to get through this time. But no, let's just shift the perspective and think of it in terms of like, what have I been wanting to do? And how can I go about that in a way that kind of just sort of changes my outlook for next season? It's a really good time for that.
I think if I could figure out, and I still might do it anyway, because people love like their pre-built workouts, but one of the, we discussed this already, but in like sometimes in swimming, I'll do this anyway year round, but like right now with almost every bike and run, I'll give like some options of intervals, and it tells you a lot as a coach, like what someone always likes to do or doesn't like to do or stays away from or like kind of goes after. But what the athletes say, hey, they said training wise, I'm feeling good about what I'm doing. I like the structure, but also flexibility. It's a bit of choose your own adventure as long as you choose one and I like it. I was like, that's the perfect way to describe it, because it is. It's like, here's 4 or 5 different intervals you could choose today. If you put them in Training Peaks, you're all going to get around the same stress level. So I'm letting you choose your own adventure. I'm just giving you a list of adventures to choose from that I like, and then I, am not allowing you, but like I would like for you to do today, one of the 5. But in doing that, like it's been a really interesting, like psychological exercise to see what like people that just listen to their body, people are go out and doing things they haven't done before. People are doing, some people want to do the same one that has variations like every week to see how they improve. Some people change it up. Some people do exactly what you and I have done, not forever, but like for so long, which is, and I still do this now, is decide what I'm going to do after I warm up.
Mm-hmm.
Or even on like long rides, like someone like, yeah, I'm hopping on there. How long? I'm like, I have no idea. Because after an hour and a half, if I feel like I've done this so many times that it's been, I think my longest ride in the lab was like unplanned. Where I did a century ride in the lab and it was unplanned. And I went 2 times again to try and do it again and didn't make it. And because I just didn't mentally have it. And to me, it's do we mentally have it and do we physically have the ability to match where we are mentally, or do we have the, and I think they have to match to really go after it. And then sometimes it's just like, I need something different. And I think that there's, again, like if there was a way the Training Piece could have like, hey, here's the, click the button after your warm up and scroll through these 3 main sets. It's the exact same training stress. And yeah, is there always going to be a time for being very, very specific and doing different intervals, different times? Yeah. But I think, and again, like I don't have any scientific research to back this, but I have to believe that athlete autonomy and belief and enjoyment is good for a very, very, very solid percentage in performance gain. So like if you took an athlete and you're like, all right, so for the next, 6 months, every session, or not every, but 60 to 70% of the sessions that you get are going to have, that are intervals, right? The aerobic stuff's got to be the aerobic stuff. And because that's really this, honestly, like the stuff the coach has to take the most charge over is making people do aerobic stuff. Unless you're like me and they're like, I just do aerobic stuff like all day long, every day. But it's like, yeah, for, all your aerobic sessions, I'm going to just, really program those out and keep them aerobic. Like that's how hard is it? Keep it aerobic. But the other ones, here's your intervals and you can just choose between 3 or 4 options on all of them. I have to believe that one, there's a much higher likelihood of the athlete doing the intervals to the best of their ability and having fun and executing it better when they choose it. And now I also recognize that a lot of athletes that it'd be pointless to even attempt because they can't operate like that. It's like too many choices. It's like, no, I don't. It's like, walking in the freaking gas station with the munchies. You're like, I could eat anything right now. This is too many choices. And you're walking out with like nothing. You're like, I don't even know what I want right now. But you get a menu with like, 3 or 4 really good things. You're like, yeah, this one's talking to me right now. This is what I want right now. And then you do it. And so I think that like that belief in that ownership piece of it is just, I think it's huge. And I think it's something that is, again, I know I talked about it the last few weeks, like here and there on different casts, but I think that is, and it's something you and I have talked about since before we even started this podcast, was just the mental and emotional buy-in that allows you to do the best, I think, physically. And so being able to provide those opportunities for an athlete to match where they are that day is I think honestly like a pretty huge key to unlocking best performance. And yes, you have to rein it in and know what you're giving and making sure that you're headed in the right direction. They're not choosing the same workout every single day. But then again, like, answer me this, like you got 10 months to train somebody and you give them the workouts and they only do 70% of them because, they don't like them or they're not exciting enough or they're not into it or they're not sure that this session's the right thing for them today. Because let's be honest, not every athlete is super coachable. I mean, sometimes they're very hard to coach. So you have that one that's 70% of the work, or you give an athlete a very simple 7-day-a-week scheme that's repeatable, that they're excited about. And then basically like every Tuesday and Friday, we're going to do intervals that are going to look pretty much the same, slight variation for the next 10 months. And they do 100% of it. Yeah, I'd put money on the athlete. More consistent, more work done. Was it the specific interval, the specific length, the specific intensity? Again, like that, I think sometimes that stuff is just so overrated and over touted by many coaches that feel like, that's what athletes want to hear. But then again, like if you look at, from a practical, as a practitioner, which you and I both are, we can look back at hundreds of athletes that have all just done incredible with completely different approaches and different execution levels and different abilities that have reached different heights based on completely different ways. Like it's not predictable. And I mean, I think you even saw that with like there's somewhat of a revolt to that. And like, yes, like science is important and data can be useful and all these things they're super, super important. And I think a lot of times like holistic is used to like downplay someone as not being smart enough to prescribe the science-backed, data-driven, intensity and specific intervals that someone gets. And I'm like, yeah, like you, but to me, I'd rather be holistic and know what I need to know about the data and the science than be data and science only and have no sense of anything holistic in me. Because then you only see numbers. You don't understand different things. It's harder to read people. I mean, and I think you saw that with Christian Blumenfeld, Gustav Eden, Casper Stornes, like all leaving all of Alexander Boo because it was over regimented and over data. And it was interesting because if you listen to a few interviews with Errol Viton, who was their coach before, when they were at their peak, when they were doing their best stuff, he was their coach. When he got to pick who was going to take over and help coach like in person, the Norwegian Federation team, he did not pick Boo. He picked Mikkel Eden, Gustav's brother, because he didn't think that Olaf had the coaching, personable, like intangibles that you needed to connect with people. And so I think that's just a feather in the cap, right? To understanding and listening, but also, knowing that there's 7 billion ways to coach an athlete. And the most important thing is like, if they're bought in and they're happy and they're excited, that we're heading in the right direction. I think most coaches are too obsessed about, touting their own brand of ways to do something, then making sure that it's the athlete gets the credit and the glory for how they got there, because no athlete listens to the coach perfectly. None of them. They all go off and do their own thing. Sometimes they all rebel. It's theirs. It's their journey. It's their race. It's their result. It's their success. If it fails, that's the coach, right? That's part of the job. But to think it's like the coach has more to do with than the athlete, I just disagree. I think it's the coach's job to get the athlete out of their own way, and then a lot of times like just provide them the best opportunities to be themselves in the best way possible. Because I honestly, outside of cost, I think the reason that most athletes don't get coaches is because they don't want to be told what to do, because they're afraid to rob them of the exploration and the fun and the flexibility of what the sport can provide. And I think we have veered way too far into the over prescriptive, obsessive, erg mode, exact watt, exact pace range. And you're making robots that can't think by themselves, can't think of themselves, and are completely incapable of altering, a plan or even a session because they don't know what feels like what. And I think it's just super important. I think it's something that, again, like going into this next year, I know I'm going to be spending more time, looking at, and I think it's just something that, deserves to be, not studied, but just pursued more, right? And with the goal of, happy, like what I say, happy and healthy, and now it's everybody's fucking slogan, but, is that's the key, right? And there's a lot of ways to get there. What's happy and healthy for you is completely different from what might look happy and healthy to me. But I think keeping athletes engaged in the process, but also making sure, again, not all, but most, that they have some ownership in it, creates more buy-in, because then it's almost like if I back out or I bail, I'm quitting myself and the coach, not just quitting the coach of the race. They're quitting themselves because they're bought in, because they have a plan.
Yeah, man, it's we always talk about building base, and I think about that. Like for me right now, I want to build a base of consistency, and to me that looks like kind of doing the shit that I sort of want to do. And if you talk about cycling, for example, it's just about what I got to get on there and look forward to it, or at least like be thinking about. So a lot of times that becomes down to doing stuff that you're good at. Like a lot of people don't like high cadence work on the bike, for example. Like, and if you're trying to just get somebody to be consistent, you can't just start jamming high cadence work down somebody's, you know, like that they don't want to do it, you know? So you got to figure out how, I think a way to, you know, you do the things that you're good at and then you get consistent with that. And then you can start working on things you're not good at because you have a base of consistency and you have the ability to sort of, you know, veer into that. You know, I think back to like, you know, you swam your whole life as a kid and then you did a lot of ocean stuff and you did all these different things that, you know, certain people would love pools and certain people love open water or whatever, but you know, you have to be sort of well-rounded. And I think back to like when I was mountain biking all the time. And that to me is what made me a decent cyclist, you know, because it's like, it's not consistent stuff. It's just you have to be ready to do almost anything, you know? And I think that if we just always work on, you know, like now's a good time to year to do the stuff that feels good and you want to do, but you know, it's the way to be consistent and then, you know, be more well-rounded as the season comes around and, you know, you're stronger and you're just in a better place to work on stuff like that. Sometimes that's it, you know, it's like, or if you can figure a way to be pumped up about getting better at, you know, something you're not good at right now. How do you turn your mind into that? That's the thing, right? It's like, you know, it's like working on dribbling with your left hand all off season. A lot of people don't want to do that because it's not fun, but it's a good time to work on stuff like that and really sort of find a joy in, you know, just being consistent, working on something you're not good at. And like you said earlier, it's sort of like look back on it, you know, not just today, but like how far you've come and be grateful that you have. I mean, the gratitude piece is so huge. I think it's like we forget it because certain days we might not feel great or whatever. And it's hard to have gratitude, but like look back at where you came from, you know, you know, I don't do that enough. And if I look back, it's like, Jesus, you know, this has been an amazing journey, but you know, you get so wrapped up in the moment that, you know, stuck in the moment that you don't even realize where you came from. And there's still so much more, you know, so much further to go and amazing things. It just becomes a little bit harder to discern as you stay around in this sport for so long. But I think just finding that level of consistency and just, you know, the joy out of working through this off season and taking it as a time when, you know, really your only goal is to just kind of stay active and keep moving because, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, and I just run into this a lot more as I get older. There's a lot of my friends, man, so grateful that I decided to do this, you know, when I started to be around 50 years old, because now I think a lot of people that get past certain points into their 60s and 70s are just, it's dicey, man. Just keep it going. And I think it's a microcosm for all of us, you know. It's like the more you let shit go, the harder it is to get back.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think one of the biggest things that we could all learn, like athletes and coaches included, is that, you know, again, like we talk about kids like not over specializing, yet adults do it 24/7. And I mean, and that's how, like, if I was to, you know, how I would approach training myself as an athlete over a 12-month period, you know, at the end of the 12th month would be like your biggest race, you know, the race you want to do the best. And we'll say, you know, for podcast topic conversation piece, we'll say it's some kind of a triathlon. Well, the way that I think most athletes should approach that, again, over 12 months, would be to train like an athlete for 3 months, 3 to 4 months, train like an endurance athlete for another, you know, 4 to 5 months, and then train like a triathlete for 3 to 4 months. And, you know, what I mean by that is, like, I think most triathletes try to be just a triathlete or nothing. Like you said, like if you don't want to bike right now and you're hating biking or swimming, just go run and lift for 3 months. Guarantee you're going to be in better shape after 90 days than piddling around trying to force yourself to be a triathlete that doesn't really want to be one during November, December, and January. but you're sure as hell a runner and an athlete, and you'll be a hell of a lot better when you get back after that. But even an endurance athlete, like maybe it's still, maybe you ran so much, and did so much lifting. You're like, yeah, now I want to just swim 4 or 5 days a week, bike, and I'll just run a little bit. Again, like you're balancing things out without over specializing. Then when it gets close to your big race, then be a triathlete for 3. I mean, I've got a lot of athletes that do that. And I'm telling you, they are the happiest, most content, most consistent athletes that I work with, because they're flexible and they're not rigid. They're not, and what I mean by flexible is, maybe it's a bad word to use, but they don't identify as a specific type of athlete that has to train a specific type of way to consider himself a, whatever it is. They just like to be fit as fuck and be able to do whatever they want to do in 6 or 8 weeks. And they have a lot of fun doing it, whether it's triathlons and running events, gravel rides, trail, whatever it is. Like, they're up for anything. And like, they just want to be, a freaking weapon. And I think that's way more fun to be a Swiss Army knife than it is to be like a very specific blade that can only do one thing. And I think that, like, for a lot of people, they over identify and try to over specialize 12 months out of the year. And why do you think you get, to me, that's why people get burnt out. They don't get burnt out on the sport. Sports don't burn you out, right? If Hayden gets burnt out, it won't be because it's hockey's fault. It'll be largely because it's my fault, or together Allie and I's fault, for not pulling him back and not making sure he's having a good enough time. He only identified with hockey and then he's lost. Like, it's not the sport's fault. I get so irritated to see, I just got burnt out on triathlon. No, you didn't. Triathlon didn't burn you out. You burnt yourself out by only identifying yourself as a triathlete. And then when you fell out of love with it, you hated it because it was no longer doing anything for you. It was no longer serving you a purpose. But when you can do whatever you want all the time and still be really fit and happy and have endless, opportunities for outlets that are exercise, you're winning. You are 100% winning. And I think that's so important for everyone to embrace all the time. A races are important. Like everyone loves a good event. Like, I get it. It's important. It's fun. But I guarantee if you ask most people, like, yeah, hey, you could train for a year and not race, but you'd end up that year so fit, best shape of your life, the weight you want to be at. You'd look the way you want to look naked. You'd be super happy. You'd have the time you want. You'd have the time that you wanted to give away. You'd give that away. But you can't race though. Or you can race a lot. You can be a little bit stressed about getting it all in. You might not feel and look the way you want to feel and look, but you're going to have some races, baby. And I'm not sure how they're going to go, but they can do that. You pick the first one. And we get over obsessive about these specific race or these identities that really, I mean, it should all come down to just being I've sweared a lot today. It's my excitement over Halloween. Just, it's better to cuss now than it is later at kids.
It's a dark holiday, man.
It is. That's also true. And I've got a black sweatshirt on and a black hoodie, which also is not a shocker. But, it's just telling you, like, most of you listening, you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. Like, yeah, I was wrestling with Hayden. He was like, I'm going to get you in a year or two. I'm like, fuck, no, you're not. I didn't say that, but I was like, no, you're not. I was like, my goal is to be able to manhandle you until you graduate from high school. It's not going to happen at the rate he's going, but still, my point in that is, like, that is my goal. Like, that is a goal of mine, to be able to hang with him and be rough with him and not feel like a feeble, like, waste of space by the time he's 11. Like, that to me, like that, and that moment, it excites me, but some days it gets me going a little bit. So I'm like, dude, I can still hang with you. Don't even like try. He's like, come on, get me. I'm like, all right, let's go. And I don't want to lose that, because like in that same podcast I was listening to about, protein or whatever, like they were talking about like the elderly population and like how fragile people are is actually like, is such a huge like part of like comorbidity is like just people's, how frail they become because of inactivity. And a lot of people start that right now because that's how sedentary. I mean, like to me, I'm going way off and we're already over time today, but like you and I talk about it a ton, like how inactive so many kids are or they're over specialized and they just don't have this like free play to like build up their endurance and their bone structure. They're like either over specializing or they're not doing shit. And that's why you're seeing so much like the injury rate in kids. Like the injury stings of kids I've never heard of my entire life. You got 11-year-old kids on fucking pitch counts. I'm like, what? And doing arm care. I'm like, what are we doing? And I think it's like, but again, it just gets worse and worse because then those kids, and just like us, like they become the parents that just sit and watch our kids do things and never do anything for ourselves. And then we become sedentary, we become unfit, and we become, incapable of doing certain things. And then the cycle just repeats itself. And like that to me, like that's just the stuff that should be the most important, because all those things to me, like, are what give us time. Right? Is it going to, the stronger you are, the fitter you are, the healthier you are, the more you sleep, the lower stress you have, like, is it a guarantee that you're going to live longer? No. Does it significantly increase the likelihood? Yes. But it also increases the joy of the time that you have. Because there wasn't a moment that over vacation where I told Hayden I couldn't do anything with him because I was too tired or I didn't feel good or I just wanted to sit. It was and that's time, right? It's time and experience with the people that you love and your kids and whoever else, might mean the most to you. Like that's, to me, like that's stuff that I think we just lose sight of so quickly in life and get so dejected with these different sports or races that we, go so all in on, and then when they're taken away, we feel lost. I'm like, listen, like there's still a whole lot of, it's again, think about like the delta between like life experiences each year and races. Like life experiences are pretty much going to win that, like there's only going to be like 3 or 4 races. It's the other things in between that allow you these opportunities to, have all these other positive things. And I just think it's a good reminder for us all when we're looking at our, race calendar for next year and just how to approach things in general.
Yeah. Well, just a quick thought on that kids and burnout and that specialization thing. And, a lot of people, will talk to me about, because I've done 12 Ironman in 12 years at 50 plus. And people ask, like, how do you do that? Or what's it? It's like, it's kind of a slippery slope, man. It's a little dicey at times, but I think the way my quote unquote secret would be is that I was very careful about not turning triathlon training into a job I hate. Mm. And that looks like a lot of different things, but it just, like you're saying, man, it's like these kids and you ran through it as a kid in swimming. It was like you got so much specialization that you just ended up not liking it. And then, obviously came back to love it again. But I just think that's such a huge piece of it. It's like we just try to get so specialized and so like focused on being this and that. And I'm sure it happens to pros, and it's like you just can't physically handle it. And mentally, it probably even more so. But I just think it's important that there's a lot of different options that we have within the realm of endurance sports to stick around and do different things or whatever. But yeah, I just think that whole thing about turning triathlon into a job that you hate is like, I see it all the time. And it doesn't have to be that way. You know what I mean?
You said you've done 12 Ironman in the last 12 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you break it down, and we'll end it on this. Like if you break it down, that's 12 Ironman races. And again, like you said, in 12 years, that's 144 months. But if only 4 months out of those years, which maybe whatever, give or take a month, correct me if I'm wrong. but it was probably only, 4, maybe 5 months that year that you were really, really, really all in on that race or triathlon. That's only 48. That's only 48 months out of the 144.
That's probably about right. Yeah.
Yeah, I figure that's probably about right for you, right? It's like that's only 48 months of that time. So of those 12 years, only 4 of those years were all in on triathlon. The other 8 was doing what Mike wants to do. And that's the reason you've done 12 and 12. Right? And I think it's the numbers I think are helpful just to be like, no, that's not a lot of time, compared to like the overall time. But it's also like that's how much time there is to do things you love and still do what you love. And so again, like as you're entering into November, tomorrow, and thinking about next year, think about it long and hard, and again, like going all in sounds great and sounds committed, but it's also can, send you over in the deep end. And so, yeah, think long and hard about it. And again, the most important thing you do is fun. We say it all the time. It was one of our first podcasts. The best ability is availability, and you won't be available to do something if you hate it. As always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he's available. Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Enjoy Halloween. Have a great one.
I will. See you, dude.
All right, man.